Chapter 20. Link groaned as Colette the stable hand re-emerged from between his legs, her sweet brown eyes bright and wide, awestruck as she gazed into the face from her books, the papers, her wildest dreams. In this moment she was the Princess of Hyrule, the beautiful beacon she'd idolized right alongside her hero, powerful enough to make a royal knight favored by the goddess tremble and come undone with her touch. She'd even braided her auburn hair and pinned it across the top of her head to be perfectly authentic before heading out to the tent, far up above the stable in the mountain pass. With the directions, the hooded hero had slipped her next to the well.
"Tell no one,"
he'd made her promise.
"It's a matter of life and death."
He reached down to caress her, his leather-cased arms pulling her up close against her chest.
"You're incredible,"
he breathed into her ear.
"Like Zelda?"
she asked.
"Better than Zelda,"
he whispered in her ear, kissing just below her jaw as his hands feasted on the dip and rise of her curves beneath the peasant's dress.
"Princesses can be so high and mighty, you know? They just don't know how to make a knight feel very special."
She nuzzled against his chest, treasuring the comfort of his breath as she pulled herself close against his side.
"It isn't true what the Lucky Clover says about you, is it?" "Why, what are they saying?" "That you actually kidnapped Princess Zelda and kept her hostage for years in Hatno Village, when all she wanted was to come back to Hyrule Castle and take her place as queen." "Of course that's a lie,"
Link grumbled, his cheeks deflating in a long sigh.
"I'd never betray my vow as a royal knight. That's just a cover story for Ganondorf to claim the princess and the kingdom, and try to twist everyone into thinking it was for their own good." "I knew it. That's what I've been saying this whole time,"
Colette exclaimed, squeezing his arm in triumph.
"But then, what will you do now that she's trapped in the castle as his queen? The paper always goes on about how much she adores the king now, and wants everyone in Hyrule to enjoy the new kingdom. But is that real? Are you going to go rescue her instead?"
He pulled her close, another belabored sigh collapsing from his chest.
"I'm afraid my dear princess has moved on,"
he said mournfully, tightening his hold around Colette.
"From everything I've heard, she's smitten with the new king of Hyrule, and I'm left out here, a fugitive in my own land." "That's tragic,"
she said.
"What will you do now?" "I'm not sure what I can do. But being here with you, it reminds me of the days when things were happy, when I was being cared for by a woman who could love me, no matter who or where I was,"
he said, smoothing her hair and placing a grateful kiss on her brow.
"You're just like the Princess Zelda I used to know, before power and aspirations got between us."
Colette raised her head slightly, the moon flush with the tent high above.
"It's getting late, but must I go? Can't I stay here with you tonight?" "Oh, sweet Colette, I wish you could,"
he said, tracing the line of her face with the hair falling around it in a disheveled frame.
"But I'm a wanted man, and if you were discovered here with me, it would condemn you to death. I must keep moving, staying out of the cruel Yiga Patrol's sightlines. I won't tell anyone you've been here,"
she vowed.
"Just please, when can I see you again?" "I'll be back through the stable in a few weeks, and I'll find you,"
he said.
"But until then, let me stare at your beautiful face just a little bit longer. I need to memorize it." "For what?" "Precious comfort while I'm on the run," he said,
his fingers lingering on her flushed cheek.
"The girl who made me feel like a hero again."
After Colette finally took off for the horse manure factory from whence she'd come, Link crawled out of the tent to take a piss in the cool moonlight. East Akala, South Akala, foothills, Gerudo Canyon, Highland, Lakeside, New Seren, outskirts, Riverside, Snowfield, Tabantha, woodland, wetlands, and now, at last, Dueling Peaks. He officially had a maiden in every last outpost, willing to give any and everything to believe that she could best the Princess of Hyrule, a reincarnated goddess, with her cast-off lover. He scratched his chest, the cheap, flimsy material of his mock tunic chafing his skin. A yawn emerged. He had a few hours before the sparse patrol spread across the marshes and wetlands noticed he was missing from his twin bridge post. Not enough time to sleep it off, but that sweet little slice of ass had been so eager, so beside herself with excitement when she saw those spring water shimmering blue eyes shaded by the wheat-hued mane. It was just too goddamn easy.
It's dangerous to go alone out here.
A phantom voice crept behind him, as the unmistakable weight of a blade came to rest at the nape of his neck.
A knight would have walked his lady home.
The Yiga Blade Master, commander of the Kakariko Village Region's patrol, pulled his hoverboard up to the Dueling Peaks camp around daybreak. It would have taken about half that time had he consented to taking a horse instead of the temperamental contraption, but he didn't spend 10 years in the depths perfecting battery propulsion to be at the mercy of a beast that had to eat and shit. At the sight of the 2-foot soldiers marking the scene, he tumbled off, letting the cart screech to a halt against a lucky stump without him.
Where is he?
He demanded, and the soldiers parted, revealing the hero's remains sunk into the grass. The blood had dried brown around the crater in his back, marking the place where he'd been swiftly stabbed through the heart. The once white-trimmed, soiled blue tunic was still unmistakably the hero's, as was the legendary master sword still strapped to his back. He hadn't had time to unsheath it. Maybe he didn't see the end coming at all. The Blade Master nudged the body with the toes of his red suit, drawing back quickly in case it magically sprung back to life. When resurrection failed to animate the hero, he grew braver, shoving his side hard enough to roll him over onto his back. His chest remained still and sallow, his last breath heaved hours before.
Which one of you did this?
The commander asked his men, and the one to the left pointed to his identical counterpart to the right. Right Yiga tentatively raised his hand, bowing his head.
How did you manage to? How did you even find him? There was a girl we spotted coming down from the pass late tonight, way past curfew for the stable.
The soldier explained.
I brought her over for questioning, and she started to panic. She begged us not to go up there, but it was pretty easy to follow her footsteps and find exactly where she'd come from. When I got up here, he was just standing next to his tent, staring up at the moon. He didn't hear you? I didn't give him a chance to,
the soldier said.
I couldn't risk letting him run or disappear or pull one of his other dirty hero tricks. Absolutely right,
the commander said, puffing his chest.
We've been terrorized by this menace for far too long. Best not to take any chances. He deserved nothing less than to die like a dog after the humiliation he has inflicted, not only upon our glorious leader, but our noble king. Glory to Master Koga. Long live the king.
Both the soldiers responded quickly.
You, go down to the stable and get the cart,
he ordered the left Yiga.
And make sure that girl is dealt with swiftly. While you're at it, being an accomplice to a fugitive is betrayal of the crown that won't be tolerated.
Once the soldier was out of sight to tend to his errands, the commander drew himself up, placing a congenial hand on the executioner's shoulder.
This is a proud day that will be written in the Yiga clan's history for all eternity,
he said.
The story of an unstoppable blade master who clawed his way out of Hyrule's darkest chasms to slay the menace, who thought he could escape his unspeakable crimes with impunity.
He squeezed hard, leaning in close, his mask obscuring the wrinkles of his crimson cape's hood.
You do understand, don't you, soldier? The news needs to come from someone with authority, you know? Someone the king can relate to on a real level. Someone to make this tale more aspirational and less, well, unimpressive. If everyone thinks the hero of Hyrule could have been bested by a random patrol all this time, it won't look great for his Supreme Highness, either. Would raise some unwelcome questions in those vacant peasant heads. But don't you worry.
He rose up, almost knocking the grunt over with the jovial slap on the back.
You'll come with me to the castle, and you'll get one of those plush assignments watching over the books and horses instead of this backwoods shithole. We're both about to move up in this world. I've heard Captain of the Royal Guard's been open for quite some time now.
In the anonymous guise of his stolen uniform, Link felt his shoulders unclench, his taut nerves easing into a breath. Their plan had worked. After all these weeks, he was heading for the gates. Up at Eldon Research Lab, Vertical Edition, Pura had immediately seized on Paillet's concept.
That's exactly it,
she raved, waving her telescope in the air like she was performing baton tricks.
Death is the answer. Hyrule's being run as tight as a bow right now,
she went on, pacing around the campfire and its roast.
As long as Ganondorf thinks that you're waiting in the wings, ready to strike, he can't move forward. Forward with what?
Joshua asked, bringing her mentor to a grinding halt. Link watched as the student winced at her own question, but Pura only seemed more inspired, tapping her lips as she mentally combed through all the articles, the evidence they'd scratched off the surface.
You're right,
she noted, much to the young girl's shock.
What does Ganondorf want? What is he waiting for? He wants you dead, but he's already gotten everything he came for, right? Kingdom, castle, Queen Ta. He's won, but the world's still on lockdown. No one can move around or grow or change except in the most careful and controlled ways, which is exhausting for everyone, including him. He can sort of shape the kingdom in stasis, but it's like rearranging doll furniture. The reality of his reign isn't real yet. And of course, however Zelda's keeping him from tossing her off of Tabantha Bridge, he can't be a fan of knowing she's got that salvation looming out there somewhere. You're not just a threat to taking what he's taken back. You're the one relic from the past he hasn't got mounted on a shelf yet, trapping them between before and after. Your corpse would disarm him, except we don't exactly want to have to bury the actual you.
The group hushed, racking their heads for every trick, spell, and power they'd pulled that would be true enough to trick a careful monster.
If Link's able to convince him that he's dead, won't it hurt Zelda to think hope is lost?
Joshua pushed, feeling brave as she leaned into the fire, the flames reflecting bright from her glasses. The corners of Pura's mouth puckered, a sour note hitting her tongue.
It wouldn't exactly help her spirit, I'm sure. Link.
She nudged, the pragmatic confidence from her voice sliding away as she kneeled down to face her glassy-eyed friend, who was picking at a worn patch on his tunic's hem.
This has to be up to you. Josh is right. This would break Zelda's heart even more than it already has.
He twirled the loose thread between his thumb and forefinger, pinwheeling the point where Zelda had cut it from her spool of blue nightshade. It made the soft places he'd ground to dust glow, a reminder that his armor was on borrowed time.
When she sees this, she'll know it was the only way,
he said. The same way she teased out every endgame as he lagged a beat behind, even now. The undestruction, the civility with which the Demon King had legitimized his claim, the months of strained patience. Link followed this strand of logic, at last grasping why he'd unhinged their home with intricate precision instead of the blunt force he had, time and time again, beaten back with blade and bow. Why he'd made it so much harder than it had to be, despite all the mocking and sneering and condescension over their muted bliss. Ganondorf was after the one thing he'd been denied in every other fleeting victory, what Link and Zelda so ferociously treasured. The peace to enjoy the spoils.
If that's the case,
Joshua said,
then I think I might have an idea.
The Skybound Council turned, rapped for the pigtailed girl and her key. She took a deep breath, her revelation electric.
There's someone curious I've seen lurking around the stables.
Within the Hyrule Castle Library, Ganondorf beheld his fallen nemesis cautiously, not unlike the Yiga Blade Master on the pass. Now that Zelda had departed, carrying the Master Sword out of his grasp, the Verena guards huddled in closer to the kill. The pretense compelling their restraint had gone to bed, though Link had to admit, he was shocked they gave any birth to her heart at all. She had left the room without resistance. Was she free here, in the castle? Over the past months he'd gotten little out of the Yigas tasked with keeping a chokehold on the Lanayru region. The commander was the only one of them who'd been in the castle at the time of the invasion, and was perpetually holed up in the commandeered Kakariko village inn, making that morning the first interaction that Link had with him since he ambushed a small, unremarkable trio of soldiers in the desolate Nadra snowfield. In the blinding whirl of snow and frozen ground, they had hardly been able to muster a fighting stance before he mowed them down with a single spinning strike. After stripping away their uniforms, he'd stacked the bodies outside of a Grizzlemaw cave, lingering in the pines to watch the bears drag them gratefully inside to feast down to the marrow. There were enough deadly squabbles and abandonments within the ridiculous faction's ranks, spread thin across the vast land as they tried to remain threatening to the increasingly restless citizens. Such care on Link's part was likely overkill. Still, he knew what Pura had warned before his departure was true. This was their last stand. There were not enough precautions that could be taken, not enough patience to exhaust.
"We aren't reinventing the game,"
she announced in her desolate court, still holding the poise and presence of a general to her troops, despite how minuscule her audience may be.
"We're turning everything that Ganondorf used to his advantage back on him. Time, patience, and surprise."
She held her old friend's eyes, knowing these words may well be the last between them.
"The only way this works is if we don't allow our own desires to override all that's now on our side. The longer he is lulled off the defense, the easier he'll fall. Which means not being derailed by anything, or anyone we might see on our mission, as much as we might want her back right that moment."
The words repeated in his head as Zelda glided past him, scarcely at arm's length. She was much paler now, her porcelain pallor contrasted by the unfamiliar black that draped her body from neck to toe. Her jaw was set in a tight line, the same way she'd grind her teeth when she was attempting to decipher a puzzle. She hugged the cloth-wrapped sword to her heart as she stared through the bookshelves, the arches, the criss-crossing stairways, not in disappointment, but confusion perhaps. She had to have seen through the ruse, didn't she? The same way he'd find the most subtle, unknowable facets of her form, what their shared life had carved and kissed into what seemed immaculate, to those who'd known her any less. When Link turned back, Ganondorf's gaze was still fixed on precisely where she'd vanished. End of chapter.